Thanks for tuning in to How She Built That. I'm Hazel Stark, your host, and today I'm joined by Hilary Crowell, owner of the Cultivated Thread. In today's interview, we're going to learn about her journey as a business owner, but with a particular emphasis on her holiday merchandising process. So let's jump right into it. And Hilary, can you just introduce yourself and your role in your business?
Sure. Thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here. My name is Hilary. I use she, her pronouns, and the Cultivated Thread is a small batch weaving studio. I focus primarily on making handwoven towels, kind of like this one. I'm very interested in making things that are beautiful and can be put to use, and a towel really serves that. So I would say 90 to 95% of everything it takes to run the business. I do get a little bit of help at certain points of the year with certain tasks, but I am the weaver, I am the bookkeeper, I do the snow removal when we need to do that to get into the studio. Yeah, and I'm located in Wiscasset, Maine.
Awesome. Thanks, Hilary. I love that you had one of your handwoven towels there just ready for us to look at. So can you describe the history of your business? How did you come up with the idea and a little bit of the beginnings?
Sure. Yeah. Before I started the Cultivated Thread, which was officially in February of 2020, I was a farmer for many years and did like a mix of livestock and veggie farming, but mostly veggie. So I would in the winter uh, do a bit of weaving when I had more time for rest and hobbies, and I loved it more and more every year. And there came a point where I was ready for a transition and decided to jump in and turn a hobby into a business. I had done some kind of like side sales, like I had little craft fairs and things like that. And so I knew I wasn't totally taking the biggest risk ever. I wasn't like really jumping that far into the deep end. Like there was interest. People seemed to like what I was making. So I felt there was some security there. So yeah, in February of 2020, I decided to like officially become an LLC and devote almost all of my time to running this business. Uh, and then the pandemic hit, and so all of the plans that I had completely changed. I was going to be focused primarily was going to be selling primarily in person, and then that needed to pivot, like everybody. And I put together a website and started doing a little bit of wholesaling.
Interesting. Yeah. When I heard you say February of 2020 was when your business was officially beginning, I was like, oh man,
Yeah.
how did this go? Yeah, I think that's really interesting that that was a very quick pivot. And I wonder whether it's easier to pivot a early business than one that is a lot more established.
Yeah, I wondered that a lot too. I thought actually I the pandemic is still happening and very hard, and I take all of that very seriously. And it was awesome for me. Like I am an introvert. Everything slowed down. So I think I think I actually, I hate to say it like this, but I think I really benefited from it, because things slowed down. er, The world just moves really fast, and it didn't for like February, March, like a little bit more. So I had time to develop a website. I had time to like put some thought into the values of my brand and all that kind of thing, and to connect with a CEI mentor and advisor and get some really good foundation laid. And exactly, like it wasn't a huge pivot because I wasn't starting from this history of having a set way of doing things.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's sort of how that shift of our routine often does inspire creativity, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you were able to lean into that really well. So you mentioned that when you really started your business, you had already been doing some craft fairs and things like that. So you had a pretty good feel that people liked what you were making. And so how did you grow the customer base over time, especially in the beginning?
Um, I mean, it was really small, and to be like 100% transparent, I I continued to work part-time for the farm that I was working at, and actually still do work at every Saturday at the Portland Farmers Market. I'm like not willing to let that go because I love it. And so that was really important to have some work to bring in some income so that I wasn't like I was not like the cultivated thread needs to pay the grocery bill, like it needs, I certainly was moving towards being financially solvent. Is that the word? I don't know. But it didn't need to be that way immediately. So it was okay that I grew slowly. So I reached out to family and friends. I guess I started with an Etsy, so I had a little bit of like a very small customer base there. Reached out to family and friends, and those were my first sales on my website. Was like for Mother's Day of 2020. And family and friends are wonderful, and they love supporting people, like they love supporting their community, and so that's where it began. And then at that point, I had an excess of inventory. Uh, and so then I was like, all right, let me figure out like where I can put this. And that's what led me to doing a little bit of wholesale. Also, because Maine is so small and everybody is connected, that there's like a little bit of word of mouth, like I know these folks at this soap shop and they happen to have a conversation with me and like know what I'm doing. And I know this person that works at this kitchen store and they think it would be great to have some hand woven towels in there. So I was really lucky. There was like a bit of a organic foundation from the start, which
Nice.
is like not a super clear answer. Unfortunately, I can't be like, this was the thing I did. It was kind of this
Well,
like,
I think it sounds like the sort of small community that you were already embedded in, and that we all know that the best marketing is typically word of mouth. And so when you're already in a small community that relies on word of mouth, maybe more than much bigger and densely populated communities, that really helps your cause in terms of getting the word out and growing
yeah.
something at a rate that feels pretty sustainable, but is still growing at the same time. You mentioned that Mother's Day of 2020 was your first sales through your website. And I'm curious whether you have a pretty steady business throughout the year, or are there high and low seasons connected to holidays or anything else seasons?
Yeah, there's like major highs and lows. Um, yeah, the definitely the fourth quarter is like massive for me. I do get a little bit of a spike around Mother's Day, and the summer is good for me as well. And that is because of where because I end up showing up at a lot of events that happen in the summer. Um, in terms of website sales, it's like Mother's Day, and then the beginning of November on is when like the majority of those sales come in. And then I do like I have a newsletter, and so I market that way, and that's people are responsive to that. But that's kind of like on me. So if I don't send it, then it's a little bit quieter.
Okay, so it does matter for you in your particular case to get those e-newsletters out there. You see a connection between sending those out and getting sales.
Yes, yeah,
Cool.
huge connection, which is really nice. I mean, it's very lovely to feel like I know if I do this thing, that probably this thing will happen.
Yeah, that's great. That's
Yeah.
really nice. I think they're not all businesses see that much of a direct correlation. So it's nice when there's something that you can be like, yep, if I do this, it'll work out. It'll get me some sales.
Yeah. And
So
I do try I'm like trying to think about what my customers want and when would be, because my product is often given as a gift. People definitely buy them for themselves,
Hmm.
and they're very much a gift. So I am thinking about those times of year that people might be looking for a gift. So also, like, I don't know, Valentine's is sort of coming up, and we'll do something with that. And like trying to figure out how to not have it be quite such a like peak at the end of the year, or it can be a peak at the end of the year. That's fine, but let's also try to get a few peaks earlier in the year.
Yeah, yeah, that always makes a business owner feel more sane when they're not, putting all their eggs in a particular seasonal basket.
Hmm.
And speaking of which, the Women's Business Center does urge business owners to get ready for the holiday season. If that is a high point or a time when you're likely to make more sales, to start getting ready for that holiday season during the summer so that there's
Yeah.
plenty of time to get things together. And you have a pretty successful systematic approach to the holiday merchandising process, which includes creating and providing wholesalers with a mini catalog of products in the springtime leading up to the holiday season. So I would love to hear more about that. Describe your strategy around holiday merchandising for us.
So I begin, now that I have a few years of data under my belt, I'll say like I love data and I'm a huge record keeper. And that really is what I use for planning. That's how I inform the decisions that I make. So I begin thinking about the structure of the year in January. This year, I started thinking about the structure of the year at the end of December, and it was awesome. And so for me, it's important to think about what is my capacity, where does wholesale like fall and fit in with my business, which I think will be different for everyone. Wholesale only makes up at most 25% of my business. And for the product that I have and my manufacturing, like the way that it's manufactured, a wholesale, it doesn't make sense for me to grow my wholesale uh, um, accounts. And so I want to keep it at that 25% or maybe less. And for me, I think another thing that's important to think about is like, what's the point of doing wholesale? For me, it's actually not about generating a ton of income because I'm at max with wholesale. It's about these incredible relationships that I have with those retailers. It's marketing for me to be in those stores. It completely builds like consumer trust in my product to see it at these amazing stores throughout Maine. So anyway, that's all like important in the thought process of what I'm going to do. So I start at the end of the year and then I backfill. So um I know that I want to be focusing on my own retail sales like in November and December. So I don't want to be doing anything with wholesale at that point. So I'm aiming to deliver to stores in October. And that means because it takes time to make handwoven things, I need to be producing in like September and August for wholesale. If I want to give a catalog of stores, so give a catalog to stores so they know what they can get, I need to have those products ready and photographed by like early August. I in the past have had a deadline for retail stores that they need to have their holiday orders into me by August 31st. So again, like if I'm going to give them a month to think about things, so then I need to have the photographs back from the photographer like by late July. I am going to have given them and just keep working backwards, which ends up meaning if it takes like a month for materials to get to me, like I'm thinking in April about what I need to order, maybe how I'm going to design those colorways, all that kind of thing, in order to be able to meet that timeline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um,
it
yeah.
sounds to me too, like you were mentioning at the beginning with the pandemic and having that forced slowdown of everything and how that was really helpful for your ability to both be creative, but also the go slow to go fast kind of a mentality of taking the time to get a business advisor and do your website and stuff like that. And it also feels to me that that also highlights why so many people gravitate towards handcrafts, is that handcrafts take how long it takes to make. They're usually slower, and there's just more that goes into it, more heart, but also more skill and hands-on time. And I kind of love that what you're describing is this incredibly thoughtful backcasting that is also forcing others to kind of slow down and think ahead, because you're going to take as long as you're going to take to be hand making these beautiful towels and other woven items for folks. And if they want in, they got to slow down and kind of take plenty of time to think about, okay, if I want this way in advance, I need to request it soon enough so that it's, I get what I want when I want it. And I think that there's a real beauty and art to the fact that you're also forcing other folks to slow down too, along with you, because I think we can all benefit. We can all benefit from that. And the way that you do that is like, yeah, giving yourself enough time. You can't just suddenly, procrastinate and say, yeah, I'm just going to weave like 50 towels tonight because I have a deadline tomorrow. Like that's not going to be possible. It's going to take longer. And so it sounds like you're really thoughtfully crafting enough time to do your work really well and make sure people have what they need when they need it.
Yeah, and I also I think that in the retail world, August 31st is like a little bit on the early side, but like not as wild as it feels for just like a consumer. Like,
Yeah.
well, so I guess some people actually do shop for the holidays all year round because they're a fun thing to do. But many people are like, the like December 20th shoppers. But retail stores like no, they have to have that. They have to have product on their shelves for the December 20th shopper. And it is a little early, and so I don't ask stores for a deposit. Like all they need to send me is what they want. And so I'm hoping that it's not, like that, like it's not too big of a deal for them. Like it gets them thinking, but it's hopefully not like putting them out too much to be like putting in their holiday order when they're wearing shorts.
Yeah. Yeah. So we just wrapped up the 2022 holiday season, and I'm wondering what went particularly well for you this year.
I mean, not to toot my own horn, but like the time that I put into planning and laying out the year in January, uh, when it was really good. Like I'm excited to do it over again. And part of what was really good, because the product that I make does take a while to produce and I have these lows. It's the end of January right now. I've already started a bin where I'm just like tucking things away for the holiday season of 2023. And the second year that I was in business, I had this voice in my head that was saying like product that's on a shelf is losing you money. And so I wouldn't do that. And then I had this aha moment this past year, and this just goes to show like every business is different. That is true for some businesses, and it is 100% not true for my business. Like product that's tucked away right now is an investment, like for the future. It's really good. And it just allows me to have an even better holiday season if I'm thinking about it many months in advance.
Yeah. So even though this holiday season went really well for you and you felt like your timing was great and you're already tucking stuff away for next year, what would you do differently? Because I'm sure as a fellow business owner myself, like there's always ways that we figure out like, how can I do this better or more efficiently or whatever it is. What do you think you would do differently?
Yeah. Oh, that's okay. That's a good question. Um, I mean, I guess one of the things that I already have done differently is I've rearranged the space that I work in. And I think that there's a lot of steps in the process of making a towel. It's not just everyone's like, how long did it take you to weave this? I'm like, well, not that long, but weaving is like one slice of the pie. And so I think about how can I eliminate a step? Can I make it's almost like I'm thinking about the journey of the towel through the studio. Can I shorten any of those steps? And because things felt like a little clunky at certain points during production last year, or when there's a lot of inventory, or I'm trying to get a wholesale order out. It's just like I really like do better in like a clean work environment, which is like not true for all artists. Like some artists are like, it needs to be messy for it to be good. Um, that's not me. And so one of the things that I've done is try to figure out a better literal, like physical workflow in the space that I have.
Yeah,
And so now I'm hopefully, yeah,
that's a good
testing
piece
that
of
out.
advice for sure, because I think often in spaces, unless you're an interior designer, which I don't know a lot of, I think we get stuck in how a room is laid out, and also not even just a physical space, but how we do our business or how we do our job. We get stuck in like, what are those routines and what are those steps? And taking a moment to take a step back to think, are there ways, like you said, that I could eliminate a step or just make this step to that step happen, transition a little bit more quickly, is a really valid thing to figure out. I remember I watched this video long ago of this teacher who had, on the first day of school, he would spend the first class basically getting his students to efficiently pass papers back to the rest of the classroom by
Oh
giving them
yeah.
each a stack and then having them all pass it back and time them. And he did the math at the end of the year to see like that 1 hour of time spent organizing papers going back in the class, how many days put together of learning time that gained them, because they hadn't lost so much in transition
Yeah,
time of the amount of time it takes to pass out the worksheet or whatever it is. And so those little investments where it feels like, okay, I'm not making a towel today, I'm not doing my bookkeeping, I'm not connecting with customers, I'm organizing my space, is it really worth it? You can sort of look forward and say, yeah, it's an investment, just like tucking away those 2023 holiday items. This is an investment in being able to have higher revenue and more impact later on.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally. The transition times, they'll kill ya.
Yeah,
It's
they add
like
up. They really add
they
up.
really do.
Absolutely. It's like the amount of time that people with office jobs spend checking emails as opposed to like doing the work. Like how much of your emails is, actually work or actually revenue, or is it just correspondence, which is valuable, but how much is that taking? What
Totally.
proportion? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, have you seen any changes in your customer buying habits in recent years, whether it's due to the pandemic or inflation or something like that, holiday trends? And if so, have you adapted to any changes in buying habits?
I I feel really lucky. I have an incredible customer base. Many of them are here in Maine and follow on Instagram and then come to an event to buy a gift or make a purchase or whatever. And so honestly, the trend that I've been seeing is people buying more. I did have to raise my prices last year because my material costs went up. And I was worried about that. That felt like a scary thing to do. And it's been okay. People are still happy to buy a hand woven towel. Uh I guess one thing that is sort of interesting, and this is like not necessarily related to specifically to like my customer base trend, but it is a little bit. I've started carrying a few items that they're like the pantry items. So I have the hand woven towels and a few other things. And then I curate collection of mostly me, mostly women owned businesses, goods that I think are awesome that I can offer that like may go really nicely with a towel and in your gift. And many of those items are like a lower price point. And so it was interesting to see at some of the shows I did last year, where this was my first year having some of these lower price point items, like folks would come and buy only those lower price point items and not buy a $40 or $45 hand woven towel, which is like totally fine and super interesting.
Mm.
Um, just to see, yeah, like how people want to spend their money. Like I um, started selling these really, really lovely Swedish dish towels. They're made of like compressed cotton and wood pulp, and you can compost them, and they're super absorbent and they're really great. And they're $7. And some folks would come to the shop and like only buy those. And like maybe they would buy 14 of them, which adds up to more than one hand woven towel. But like, they're getting a lower price point item. So that's super interesting. Probably not related necessarily to the pandemic. I think it's just actually a reflection of me. Like when I broaden my product offerings, I get different customers. So not
Interesting. Yeah.
exactly talking about pandemic and inflation and things, but kind of.
No, that makes sense. And I think it also speaks to the value of small businesses and the relational nature of your customer base. I think people are wanting, even when purse strings are tight, right? I think folks are still wanting to support the person they have a particular relationship with, or a product that they have a particular relationship with. And like you said, your products are regular household items that people have a relationship with. If you're doing dishes every day at least once and you need to dry your hands, if you're always doing that on that particular towel and you love the absorption and you love its beauty, why would you want to lose that if that's such an important part of your day? And so, yeah, I think that ability that you have highlighted many times throughout this conversation of that relational nature, that connection to the slow, thoughtful process that is handcrafts, both in creating them, but also in using them and purchasing them, I think is really a boon to why you maybe haven't seen as much of a change in customer buying habits, even though our economy and the amount of time that you've been in business has changed dramatically. So that's
Yes.
pretty wild that you haven't seen as much of a change considering
I
all of that.
I know. I feel really lucky. I feel really lucky, and I don't want to, yeah, I'm grateful.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I want to wrap up this conversation here in just a moment because you've done a really great job of highlighting both how you got started, how you've built your customers, and also how you think about the holidays, which I think is a pretty unique way of thinking about the holidays, not only just because of the nature of the products that you make, but also just in terms of your clearly forward-thinking brain that you have. And so I am curious what advice you would have for other product-based businesses who might rely a lot on holiday sales.
Yeah, I think I mean, if you're having the conversation with yourself about like like what are my revenue streams, I think it's really worth like thinking about like what is the goal? Like if you're going to be doing wholesale, like why? Is it really just about the income? Or like for me, it's not necessarily about the income. So thinking like big picture, like it's always good to have goals. It never hurts. Have some goals. And then I also think it's important to think about capacity and like what is your capacity, whether that's like your production capacity or your like willingness to put in long days. Like maybe you're only willing to work 20 hours a week on this thing. Like I think it's worth thinking really big picture and really holistically as much as possible about how all of the pieces of the business ecosystem fit together. And then you can dial in to each of them a little bit. Like I'm able to answer the question about capacity and production because every single time I make something on the loom, like every single project has its own like recipe card, so to speak, that has, the materials that went into it, the amount of time that went into it, the cost that went into it. And so I can make really large informed, like very big picture, large informed decisions because of this very detailed information that I have. So I think record keeping is great.
Mm-hmm.
I guess those are a few nuggets.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, it sounds like that backcasting around time, both in terms of what your customer needs, but also what you need in terms of your own capacity and those records, and thinking about how can I make sure that I'm not losing money on the amount of effort that I'm putting into something, whatever that product is that you might be making and getting out there. Kind of goes back to that email question. It's like, how many emails are you having to deal with? And is that taking away from, the stuff that may matter more depending on what kind of business you have?
Yeah. I think it's just always good to also just like check in, check in with yourself. Like, am I happy with what I'm doing? Like, how are all these pieces working together? Like, how is the space working? And being, like whatever the thing is, being willing to ask, like, is this working? And if the answer is like, can you be honest? Like, the answer is no, then what changes could be made?
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you, Hilary, so much for taking the time to chat on this edition of How She Built That holiday merchandising edition, I suppose. And everyone who is excited hearing about her beautifully crafted woven items can check out the Cultivated Thread online. And also, I imagine, at a craft fair near Wiscasset at some point. Yeah.
Definitely. Yes, definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for being here and offering your amazing advice from a few crazy turbulent years of the world that you've managed to have a business really work out, and not only work out from a revenue perspective, but also from really making people's lives better by having what you create in their homes and making them feel comfortable and in touch with those important things like cooking and doing the dishes and drying your hands.
Yeah.
So thank you, Hilary.
Thank you so much. It was great to be here.